On the very first day that Steve Cohen takes over as new Mets owner, he gets rid of the entire front office. He said Brodie Van Wagenen, Omar Minaya, Allard Baird, Adam Goodrich, Jared Banner, you're out, get out, you're gone. Fired the entire front office pretty much. He kept Sandy, who we knew he was bringing in. But other than that, the Mets have a lot of work to do now. In this video, I'm going to talk about the move that Steve Cohen made to really get rid of all these guys in the front office. Brodie was a surprise, but people like Omar and Allard Baird and Guttridge, that's very interesting to see that he would get rid of that many guys in the front office on the very first day of taking over. If you guys like this video, leave a like, comment. What do you think about this move to really clean out the front office? And what moves do you think are next for the Mets? You know, what areas are they going to address now? Because the big thing about what they did here was they got a new front office. This way they know what players to pick in free agency because they're going to be able to do a lot of scouting on them and studying and know which guys are the right players for the team. And if you want to see more videos from me in the future and want to keep up with everything I'm posting, make sure to press the subscribe button. It's free and it makes my day. I like watching Hell's Kitchen. It's one of my favorite shows to watch. Obviously reruns, new season coming in January, but I like to see how Gordon Ramsay, the way Ramsay approaches his kitchen, and if you mess up and you don't meet his expectations, he throws you out. And you'll see a lot of times he'll have a whole team, he'll say, get out! Get out! Get out! And that's pretty much what Steve Cohen did. Like, Steve Cohen is showing that he is not messing around. He is showing that he has the mentality of, I'm in charge and things are going to be different now. And the Mets need different because what have the Mets been? A laughingstock. They've been losers. They've been a team that is constantly cheap. They have weird things happen and are very unlucky. So it makes sense why you would have to make such drastic moves to really change the entire culture of this team. Omar Minaya, I like Omar because I think he did a really good job with international scouting. I feel like he's found a lot of good Hispanic players for the New York Mets that have come onto the team. And he picked out a lot of good players for the Mets when they had their success in 2015. You would hear people say, oh, well, Sandy really has a lot of Omar's guys. You would hear things like that. And I think that's the reason why Omar Minaya is gone. The fact that trying to have him and Sandy work together, I don't think that was going to work out. You know, Cohen really wants Alderson as his guy under him. And then after that, who else is going to fill in? We already knew that there has been this idea that there's going to be two people under Sandy Alderson. Now, there's going to be those two people and then the rest of your front office, you know, the rest of your scouting department. So the Mets definitely have a lot of work to do now because they really want to make sure that they have the right guys in the front office that are going to be picking the right players for the right criteria. It seems to me that maybe if the Mets bring in some new minds, who knows, maybe they're going to be younger, more analytical. Are they going to be looking at these extra stats like a WAR, like whiff rate, like BIP, you know, all these other metrics and all the analytic stats that are out there for analyzing players instead of looking at average or on base percentage or the traditional stats that most fans know? Are these new guys that are going to be coming in looking more at that? Because we know that Steve Cohen wants to upgrade the analytics department. So this kind of would fall in line with that theory. And I just think that it's very interesting that this is the way he's showing, this is how I'm going to do business. Like, all of you are out. This is us now. We are taking over. It's going to be brand new. And I think that's probably the way to do it as long as you don't do that with the players. You know, as long as you keep the Alonso and the McNeil and the Conforto and guys like that, obviously DeGrom, as long as you keep them, you'll be okay. But I think it is a good idea that before you do this spending spree and you go after all these big-time players, if you try to make a trade for Francisco Lindor, which I was going to make a video on, I literally was about to record, be like, all right, let's talk about why the Mets need to trade for Lindor. But instead, this happened, so I'm going to talk about this instead because it definitely is a more newsworthy because the idea of Lindor is just a potential idea, not breaking news that actually happened like this. So I think that if you are going to be a team that's like, okay, we know this is a down market. There's a lot of good players out there, and the Mets have a lot of areas to address. That's the other thing to keep in mind is that this Mets team is obviously not complete. They haven't been to the playoffs in a few years now. We know they need catcher after declining Ramos. They've needed two-way center field for a very long time. They need starting pitching. They need bullpen. So there's a lot of work to be done. So you're going to have to get some players if you want to fill in those areas. And I think that it's smart for Cohen and Sandy Alderson to make sure that they have the right guys that are going to be valuable players and be like, okay, these are the guys we need to sign. These are the players we need to bring in to fill these holes. Not have the original front office, especially not Brodie. I understand why Brodie Van Wagenen lost his job because he did not necessarily perform. He did not do his job well because the Mets didn't do good. He tried to say we're in win now. We're going to make all these moves. And it's highlighted by the Robinson Cano, Edwin Diaz deal. which still we can't fully grade quite yet because in the first year, Diaz was not good. Cano was good, then hurt, then good, then season was over. And then for what the Mets gave back, we don't know about Kelenic yet. Everything and everybody says that Kelenic is going to be a star, but he still is yet to perform a lot on the major league level. So until then, we don't know just how much the Mets gave up. And in 2020, in the shortened season, Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano were both much, much better. And if they do that again, they definitely could be a big part of the Mets' success in 2021. So I think that trade isn't the worst trade in the world because if Diaz and Cano are performing, then you know what? You have a win-now team. And we know how bad the Mets need bullpen. And I thought Diaz was pretty good last year. He was definitely a lot better than the year before. And most of the time, he got the job done. I think with Edwin Diaz, there is very specific criteria for when you bring him in. It has to be bases empty. He has to have pitched a couple of days ago. He can't have a long layoff because then his command is out of whack. He can't come in with runners on. So it's these little things like that for Diaz that if you give him all the perfect scenario and utilize him in those areas, he will succeed, in my opinion. So, because I saw Edwin Diaz when he had a clean inning and he had a good amount of rest, not too much rest, but it was warmed up enough, he got the job done. All of his worst outings were when he came in and there were runners on base, especially when they would bring him on the bases loaded and he hit a batter or he walked a batter because Diaz needs a clean inning because if the bases are empty, all it is just a runner at first. But when the bases are loaded, it's a run. So that's why you have to be very careful with how you use him and why he can still bring value to this Mets team in the bullpen if you use him in those situations. Because like I said, the Mets have needed bullpen for a long time. So that move for Brodie is kind of up in the air. The J.D. Davis move definitely was a pretty good move, no doubt about it, because J.D. Davis has performed offensively. He played a really good third base this year. I think you have to give him a ton of credit for that because his first year as a Met, he did not look great at third base. He was inconsistent with his throwing, but he looked way better than Jeff McNeil did, which was a big surprise at third base for the defense. Didn't look great out in left field, but just knowing that you have the versatility that in an emergency you could play him in left field, that's important. Especially what's going to be happening next year with the Mets having no DH. Who's going to fill in their lineup in all these different positions. So having somebody versatile like J.D. Davis could be very valuable. And who knows, J.D. Davis could be a part of a trade that may bring in Francisco Lindor or somebody else. So he has value in that regard. The other moves by Brodie, that's what got him fired. The Marisnick move, bringing back Todd Frazier, getting rid of guys, for Billy Hamilton, all these fourth outfielders, Juan Lagares, all these moves that they're trying to get backup players, Jed Lowry, that they just did not work out at all. So many times the Mets were just losing prospects, just losing pitching arms. All these prospects in their minor league system that were pitchers, they just lost all of them. The fact that the Mets gave up Blake Taylor for Jake Marisnick is the silliest trade. It's worse than the Cano Diaz trade, in my opinion, because you know how much value somebody like Blake Taylor would have in the Mets right now, a controllable, young, left-handed reliever, where the Mets, as of right now, have no lefty relievers in the roster. I think having somebody like Blake Taylor over somebody like Marisnick, who number one was hurt, number two isn't that good. He's not a starting center fielder. He's a backup defensive replacement, which then you got Lagares, then you got Billy Hamilton. So how many replacement defensive center fielders do you really need? So I just think that it was stuff like that constantly happened. Having Elio Hirata make starts, just then all of a sudden you have Walker Lockett make starts, who shouldn't be making starts to begin with. But he's relatively okay sometimes. You lose him, you know what I mean? The mismanaging of the roster was constant with the way they used options and how they had to get rid of, like I said, so many young arms, so many pitching prospects, and you need pitching desperately in baseball. It's so important. Not saying that any of these guys that the Mets ended up losing to a team like the Pirates or the Mariners or whatever are going to become these amazing pitchers, but I still think that you need those arms. You can't get them back. So what happens now is that because Brodie was so involved in trying to be in win-now mode and gutted the farm system, that is where all these new front office guys are going to have to come in and rebuild it and replenish it. They're going to have to do really good scouting to find other players that can now step into the farm system and get more top prospects, because you know what? All of the Mets' good prospects are pretty much on the major league team. Now, I know Alonso's not a prospect anymore, and McNeil, and Jimenez, and Conforto, and Nimmo, all these guys are on the major league roster right now. So in the farm system, you have a couple of nice pieces here or there, but nobody's super crazy that's like, okay, well, we know we have him in a few years, he's going to take over. There's not necessarily that one particular prospect that you really talk about a lot. Other than the shortstop the Mets have, that's the only prospect they have that's a top 100 prospect. So there obviously is more work to be done there. And that's another area where having a brand new front office is really going to help. And also just the fact that we could talk about the moves Brodie made, bringing in Jed Lowry or all these other outfielders and losing pitchers. The main thing is that the Mets did not win. They failed expectations. They were underachieving, and they didn't make the playoffs. They were really bad in 2020. They were an extreme disappointment. With the expanded playoffs, with the roster they had, they really should have been much better than that, because it just seemed like a lot of the moves that Brodie made, they just didn't work out. Dylan Betances, that didn't work out. Jeurys Familia, that hasn't worked out. You could just go on and on with all the players that he has brought in that really have not been all that great. So I do think that it's disappointing that Brodie had come in for Sandy and had done such a poor job, but obviously it is a new day. It's a new Mets, new owner, all that good stuff, and I'm just very excited to see what the Mets end up doing, and now who is going to be in this front office, because again, there's so many chairs that they have to fill in right now, and then what players are they going to target? That's where the real fun is going to begin, and I'm excited to see how it happens. At least we know that, as soon as Cohen takes over, he's showing that he's not messing around. He is here to make something happen, and that's what you hope he will do with players as well, because we know the Mets really need. Until the next video, be safe, be smart, be healthy, and have a good one, everyone.